Hi, this is János, it's Real World Audio, and this is the second part of the mini-series of improving our listening skills or hearing skill set. And this is for audiophiles, music lovers, but also for musicians, even martial artists. So basically, the first part of this mini-series, I shared about that there's two main types of how we hear sounds and noises and speech, and at least in the scientific description, and there's the majority, which we would call as evolved hearing, and there's a subset of people who have so-called primitive hearing, and that was the homework to find out whether you have primitive hearing or evolved hearing. And now I want to reflect on that. So basically, all of us, regardless which subtype you are, we both hear speech and we both hear noises. The difference between the two is that if you are of the primitive hearing subtype, then when things get really busy around you, there's a lot of noise and a lot of people talking at the same time, then your brain will continue focusing on the noises and the sources of the noises, and will identify the people talking as sound sources, and your attention will be on the position of the sounds, whether the positions change, positions shift, and they will be recognized as potential danger sources that alert you, versus in the evolved hearing subtype, where you recognize them as sources of speech, and your brain tunes out all of those other sound sources that are virtually labeled as noise by the brain. So most people, when we are in a group of people, they can tune out the background noises, all the hustle, bustle, what's happening, and when there's like 5 people chatting and talking at the same time in a social event, they have no trouble just picking out one person, focusing on that person, and no trouble hearing what the person says. And if that's true for you, then you have the evolved subtype hearing, and I am not like that. So if there's like 5 or 6 people and then more than one person is talking at the same time, I can't make out what they are hearing, because in that case that kind of triggers something in my brain to put me on alert. It kind of like says danger, and then when that happens, then basically I can hear everything that is around me, even behind me. I can, even if I close my eyes, I could describe like an accurate 3D soundscape happening around me, and those 2 people who are talking, even with closed eyes, I can tell, okay, now that person moved the head a tiny bit, or a step back, or came a little bit more forward, or they just lost the balance meanwhile they were talking, and all of that just real-time accuracy, and it just takes immense brain processing power. And if there's like things happening around, like people walking around, I am aware of every single people taking steps or walking around behind me, and if they're making any kinds of noises, I hear those noises, and I'm aware of the exact 3D position where that noise occurs. And also things like if the acoustics changes, so someone brings in, let's say, a big piece of furniture, that affects how the sounds project in the room. I notice that right away, and when there's a lot of these things happening, it's very tiring, very fatiguing for the brain, and that's why now, just translating this into a stereo listening experience, that often you notice that there's like a group of audiophiles listening to someone's stereo system, and there's some people who are really happy with it, and oh wow, the vocals were amazing, didn't you think so? And they are super happy with that, very energized. And then there's others who are just drained after that, and they don't know why is that, why was it so tiring, what happened there. And that's because a lot of stereo systems have a lot of distortion, especially in the high frequencies. And when your brain can tune out all of that background noise, all of that background distortions, then that's not bothering you. And you can listen to the vocals, which might be very crisp, very enjoyable, and you will love it. But your friend who has this primitive hearing cannot tune out those noises, and there's just so much of them that it will just wear them down completely, like major fatigue. And when we say that a system has high distortion and that causes fatigue, that's why it causes fatigue, because the brain is trying to make sense of all that added distractions, trying to map a 3D acoustic map of what's happening, and that requires a lot of brain power, and you will get very tired after that. And this is why you get tired and why you don't. If you have primitive hearing, you get very tired because your brain is constantly at work. You cannot switch off this feature of your brain to map your surroundings. And that's when you have to be very careful about how you build your stereo system. And I think for these people, if you belong to this subtype, just forget solid state altogether. It's off the table for you. Because I have this type of hearing, and there's only maybe one solid state amplifier I ever heard in my life, which does not do this kind of doesn't add this busy hustle of extra things happening that are not happening there, just tiring down the brain. Maybe that's it for this episode. Just be aware that how your hearing is, it is also reflected on how you will be able to tolerate your stereo system, and why others tolerate, why you don't, or vice versa. And I think I took a few notes what I wanted to share. So basically, when you have complex music, playing complex music in your stereo, and then it might, if it gets harder for you to make out the vocals, what they are singing, then it might be also your hearing skills. So like two people, primitive hearing, evolved hearing, they are listening to the same system, and one will say, wow, I can understand the speech perfectly, and the other says, no, I can't make out the voices. And it might not be because there's a problem with the vocals, but the problem is that because you have this primitive hearing, the vocals might be clean, but there's so much distortion going around in the background instruments. There's that, or maybe the system has some inherent noise floor that is just using up all the processing power in your brain, and you don't have enough attention left for the vocals. And in that case, just be aware that you just need to expand your awareness to figure out what's going on. That are you hearing something? Is your brain warning you of something subconsciously that you are not identifying consciously what's happening? And this little mini series of mine is about that, to how to make you aware of what's going on. And to do that, the number one step is just to be aware of your own hearing, how it works. This was the topic of the first episode, and now the second episode, and then we will continue on from here of how to make sense of your surroundings. So first you have to be aware of how natural sounds sound, how you can perceive the natural sound, and that will be the subject of the next little episode. Thank you for tuning in, and bye bye.